if you could you describe in general terms from your perspective the current state of the relationship between the U.S. government and military and the Chinese regime and the PLA?
Yeah, if you talk to the White House, perhaps they'd say, this is managed competition or competitive coexistence, and they're trying to, keep the relationship stable and to protect America while managing a more bellicose and aggressive China, whose rise seems to be accompanied by more aggression and pressure in a lot of different areas as they attempt to reshape the international order and make room for authoritarianism and, their view of the world. And so this is an active rivalry. The rivalry is strategic and to tactical in nature, and it will continue for many, many decades. Even as China faces economic headwinds, that doesn't change the ambitions of Beijing and Xi Jinping. And even if Xi Jinping goes, there are many hawks left in Beijing that believe what Xi Jinping believes, that it's China's time to come take center stage, that America was overly entrusted with managing many things in the world and proved to be what they thought was an aggressive hegemon that, was responsible for Arab Springs and Iraq wars and chaos in the Middle East and all sorts of other things that we've done that has led to chaos and suffering around the world. And they think that the Chinese way is going to be a better way. And so they aim to displace the U.S. as the strongest pole in a multipolar world. And they're actively trying to redefine the rules of the game. And they are trying to advance their sovereignty goals, which include, trying to capture territory, which means that they're fundamentally revanchist and expansionist. And these kinds of activities put them in direct friction with not just the United States or the Western world, but the international order as we know it. And so that's being tested in the places like the South China Sea, as you pointed out.
Mm-hmm. If you could, talk to me about that, the aggressive actions that they're taking and have been taking against the Philippines, as an example, the Vietnamese, in the South China Sea. From your perspective, what's the point? Are they is it saber rattling for them to make a point? Is there a greater strategy there? What is their end game with that?
No, they've asserted and they convinced themselves that all of the South China Sea within the 9, 10, 11 dash line, however you define it, that kind of loops up by Taiwan, that's theirs. That's their territorial sovereign ground, and that they've laid out the rules of the road. There will be no more additional outpost building. There will be very clear efforts to establish, quote, effective control as they attempt to use their militia and Coast Guard and PLA Navy and Air Forces to do so. And anybody that tries to push back is going to get rolled over. And small states suffer what they must. Essentially, a little bit of the Melian dialogue that big states do what they can do, small states will suffer what they must. So it's an affront to them that the Philippines is sort of pushing back to them. And this is the rub. The Philippines is an ally of the United States, and we are close to potentially activating the mutual defense treaty with them if the Chinese actually, go ahead and commit an aggressive act that would lead to a loss of a ship or loss of life, loss of an aircraft, something along those lines. You're very close to a miscalculation there. The Chinese think they can get away with it. They think they can manage these tensions. They think that they're actually exhibiting restraint because, after all, they didn't sink outright or kill people already. So they think by water cannoning and lasering and, boarding, ships or ramming them, that's actually a milder form of pressure that's totally acceptable. And so far, because they haven't been held to account, except reputationally through videos and things like that, there's no pushback that's been very strong in the international community that's affected other vital interests. the Chinese can keep doing what they're doing because it enables them to have effective control over these key areas, whether it's Scarborough Shoal, Sabina Shoal, Second Thomas Shoal, or any of the holdings that Vietnam also claims.
Yeah, they've been particularly aggressive in their military buildup over the recent past, and particularly with their Navy. Could you talk to us a little bit about that in terms of their capacity compared to the U.S.? How would you rate the two? How would you compare the two?
They're a modern Navy. They are a peer to the United States in many ways. They are not globally deployed like we are. So we have less than 300 ships. They have 375 odd battle force ships that include submarines when you count them battle force. And so they'll be approaching 400 ships in their battle force by the 2030s. We will still barely be able to make 300. Ours will be a globally deployed force. Theirs will be primarily in the first and second island chains. If you take a look at 85% of the fleet today, that's operating within the first island chain. 95% of the fleet is within the second island chain on any given day. There are only a few other ships that are scattered further abroad, let's say Djibouti and Africa. And so the vast majority of their capability, which already outnumbers ours by volume, is they're concentrating around those flashpoints. And they have, obviously shorter distances to go to replenish, refuel, rearm, et cetera. And they have very thick intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance belts, whether they're in the space domain or the aerial domain or others. So they have a lot of advantages of what we call interior lines close to their mainland. And they have the bases that you talked about, the ones that they reclaimed in the South China Sea and built up to the strong points with, missile systems and all sorts of capabilities there that are now the basis for many of the activities that the Chinese are conducting in the South China Sea.
So they're ahead. This is a very simplistic way of looking at it, but they're ahead in numbers. What about technology in terms of the capabilities of the vessels that exist on both sides?
They have advanced technologies with all of their combat systems. And so I would say that if you're going to compare, first of all, if you were to do aggregate Navy to Navy, our volume tonnage is much higher because we have some bigger ships in terms of amphibious ships and aircraft carriers than they do at this point in time. Their tonnage line comes up and it almost meets us in the 2040s and 2050s. Their volume is clearly higher at this stage of the game, and they're all clustered around a place where we're relatively thin, even with our 7th Fleet forward. So there's the advantage of capacity, volume, or numbers. In terms of their ability to employ weapons, we don't doubt this. They are the most proficient in exercising their weapon systems. They do more live fires than any other force on the planet. You see this in ballistic missiles. You see this in air-to-air missiles. You see this with regard to naval weaponry. They've been practicing Taiwan scenarios year after year after year, right there in the Taiwan Strait or further north and south. And they have, exercises that last, 4 or 5 months at a time as they practice to fulfill what Xi Jinping asked them to do, which is to have enough threshold capability by 2027 to be able to take orders to execute options, no matter what they may be, including a high-intensity combat environment against Taiwan, factoring, quote, interventionist forces from the United States or any other allies. That's what they're building. They're building it like hotcakes in every area. And I would just add a point that it's not so much the Navy to Navy comparison or things like that. You have to look at the entire joint capability and think about it in terms of their system of systems versus our system of systems and how they interact, who has advantages, how is it all going to work out in terms of net aggregate comparison of capabilities. The Navy has to worry about the rocket forces probably much earlier than the Chinese Navy forces as we might close in into areas where we would deliver weaponry.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and leave a comment, a really positive, nice, and kind comment. That would be appreciated. And if you're not already subscribed to our channel, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our daily updates.